welcome. We're glad you're here tonight. It's a special Shabbat. Rabbi Gary Zola, who is the Emeritus Director of the American Jewish Archives, among many other things, is our guest speaker tonight. So he'll be teaching us about Lincoln and the Jews.
That's right.
Okay. And we go way back. I'll tell you a little more about that later. But in the meantime, let's sing on page 10. And I'm using the smaller book, and I'm using the black page numbers, not the page numbers in the brackets. Okay? So page 10 at the top of the page. Hine matovu manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matovu manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matovu manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matovu manayim shevet achim gam yachad. All right, and we'll continue now by welcoming Shabbat, and it's my privilege to invite Sharon Snyder to lead with me. Join me down here, and join all of us on pages 3 and then 2 for the Shabbat candle lighting. And what we do is first read one of those, and then on 3, and then the blessing. Yes, one of those, just pick.
As these Shabbat candles give light to all who behold them, so may we by our lives give light to all who behold us. As their brightness reminds us of the generations of Israel who have kindled light, so may we in our own day be among those who kindle light. Like the candles.
Yeah, and I would maybe not take the whole thing, maybe the candle. Yeah, there you go.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kinishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Shabbat.
Amen.
Blessed are you, Adonai our God, sovereign of the universe, who hallows us with mitzvot, commanding us to kindle the light of Shabbat.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. Shabbat Shalom.
Good evening, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. My name is David Weisman. I'm on the board of Temple Brit Shalom. I have the honor tonight to attend the service from the Bima and welcome everybody here. Is this on?
There you go.
We're going to follow on page 9. There are days when we seek things for ourselves and measure failure by what we do not gain. On Shabbat, we seek not to acquire but to share. There are days when we exploit nature as if it were a horn of plenty that can never be exhausted. On Shabbat, we stand in wonder before the mystery of creation. There are days when we act as if we care nothing for the rights of others. On Shabbat, we remember that justice is our duty and a better world our goal. So we embrace Shabbat, day of rest, day of wonder, and day of peace.
Thank you. And of course, we're also honored to be welcoming Temple Israel to join us tonight for this special occasion of having our guest speaker Sorry if I didn't say that earlier, but we are thrilled that you're here with Rabbi Stern, and our service will continue on page 27. At the bottom of the page, entrances to holiness are everywhere. The possibility of ascent is all the time, even at unlikely times and through unlikely places. There is no place on earth without the presence. Our service continues on the facing page 26. I invite you to join me as you're able. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah B'alma divrach yirtei v'yamlik malchutei B'chayekon uvyomekon Uv'chayei kol beit Yisrael Bagala bagala Uvizman karib V'imru Amen Heshmei Rabbah Mevorach Le'olam Yomei Amaya Yitbarach V'yishtabach V'yitpa'ar V'yitrama V'yitnaseh V'yitadar V'yitaleh V'yitalal Shemei D'Kudashah B'rihu Le'ela Minko Birchata L'shirata Tushbekata B'nechemata Damiran B'yama B'imru Amen. Page 29. In the middle of the page, O God, you are as near as the very air we breathe, yet farther than the farthermost star. We yearn to reach you. We seek the light and warmth of your presence. Though we say you are near, we are lonely and alone. Together, oh, let our desire be so strong that it will tear the veil that keeps you from our sight. Let your light release our hearts and reveal the glory and joy of your presence. We continue on the facing page 28 with Baruch Hu, our call to worship. We rise. Ya la la, ya la la la, ya la 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 la. Baruch Hu et Adonai, Hamivorach. Baruch Hu et Adonai, Hamivorach. Baruch Adonai, Hamivorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch Adonai, Hamivorach le'olam va'ed. Ya la la, ya la la la, ya la 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 la. Page 31. At the top of the page, together. Praise to you, Adonai our God, from whom the evening flows. Your wisdom sets the way on which time and season lie. Your breath guides the sail of the stars. Creator of the tide, time and light. You guide the current of day into night. As heaven spans to infinity, you set its course for eternity. Praise to you, Adonai our God, from whom the evening flows. Baruch atah Adonai, Hama'ariv Haravim. Page 33. We pray responsibly beginning in the middle of the page. Wisdom and wonder, passion and instruction, story and symbol.
All these things your Torah is to us.
And the more we devote ourselves to it, the more it grows and gives.
What could be a truer token of your abiding love?
Than this holiest of your works and the living language that gives it form. Baruch atah Adonai, Ohel Am Yisrael. We continue on pages 34 and 35. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. 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 Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto, Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto, Le'olam Va'ed. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. You may be seated. We continue together on page 36. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'odecha ve'hayu ha'devarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinatam levanecha v'dibarta bam v'shivtecha b'beitecha uv'lechtecha b'derech uv'shochtecha uv'kumecha ukshirtam le'ot al yadecha v'hayu litotafot b'neinecha uv'tavtam al mezuzot beitecha uv'isharecha leman tizkeru v'asitem et kol mitzvotai v'tem kedoshim le'lohechem ani Adonai Elohechem asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim v'hiochamchem Elohim ani Adonai Elohechem. Page 39, responsibly beginning in the middle of the page. In a world torn by violence and pain, a world far from wholeness and peace, give us the courage to say, Adonai, there is one God in heaven and earth. From bondage in Egypt, we were delivered at Sinai. We bound ourselves to your way. Though our failings are many and our faults are great, it has been our glory to bear witness to our God, keeping alive in dark ages your vision of a world redeemed.
Let us see the work today, when the nations will be one and at peace. Then shall we rejoice as Israel, singing on the shores of the sea.
Page 40. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi chamocha nedar b'kodesh, no ratehilo osefelet, no ratehilo osefelet, malchutecha ra'uvanecha, bokei hayam, lifnei Moshe Miriam, ze Eliyahu ve'amru, Adonai Yimloch, Adonai Yimloch, Le'olam Vaed. V'ne'emar kifada Adonai et Yaakov, v'galo miyad chazak mimenu, baruch atah Adonai ga'al Yisrael. Page 42. Ashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom. Grant, O God, that we lie down in peace and raise us up our guardian to life renewed. Spread over us the shelter of your peace. Guide us with your good counsel. For your name's sake, be our help. Shield and shelter us beneath the shadow of your wings. Defend us against enemies, illness, war, famine, and sorrow. Distance us from wrongdoing. For you, God, watch over us and deliver us. For you, God, are gracious and merciful. Guard our going and coming to life and to peace evermore. Blessed are you, Adonai, guardian of Israel, whose shelter of peace is spread over us, over all your people Israel, and over Jerusalem. Baruch atah Adonai, haporeis sukat shalom aleinu, v'al kol amo Yisrael, v'al Yerushalayim. Page 44, at the top of the page. V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, lasot et ha-Shabbat l'dorotam berit olam. V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, lasot et ha-Shabbat l'dorotam berit olam. Beini uvein b'nei Yisrael, oti le'olam, oti le'olam. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, lasot et ha-Shabbat l'dorotam berit olam. Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et ha-shamayim ve'et ha'aretz. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, lasot et ha-Shabbat l'dorotam berit olam. Uvayom hashvi Shabbat vayinafash, Shabbat vayinafash, Shabbat vayinafash. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, lasot et ha-Shabbat l'dorotam berit olam. On page 47, towards the bottom of the page, we read from Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav that every word of one's prayer should be like a rose that is picked from a bush. One gathers rose upon rose until a bouquet is formed and can be offered to God as a beautiful blessing. And with that in mind, we continue with Tefillah on the facing page 46, which then continues on consecutive even numbered pages. We rise. Adonai sifatai tiftach ufi yagi tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Page 48. Baruch atah Adonai stay avot v'imahot, umevi gila livnei v'neihem, lema'an shemo v'ahava, melech hozer u'moshia u'magin, Baruch atah Adonai, Magin Abraham, Bezrat Sarah. 50. Atah gibor le'olam Adonai, Mechaye akol atarav lehoshia, Mechalkel chayim bechesed, Mechaye akol berachamim rabim. So noflim verofet cholim, umatir asurim, umekaye mehunato lishenei afa, michamocha bal gevurot, umidomela. Menit u'mechaye u'matzmiach Yeshua v'ne'eman atah lechayot hakol Baruch atah Adonai mechaye hakol. 52. Atah kadosh v'shimcha kadosh u'kadoshim b'kol yom yalucha selah. Baruch atah Adonai ha'el ha'kadosh. You may be seated. At the top of page 55. May these hours of rest and renewal open our hearts to joy and our minds to truth. Together, may all who struggle find rest on this day. May all who suffer find solace. May all who hurt find healing on this day. May all who despair find purpose. May all who hunger find fulfillment on this day. And may this day fulfill its promise. Baruch atah Adonai. Page 57. Ever-present one, may we, your people Israel, be worthy in our deeds and our prayer, wherever we live, wherever we seek you, in this land, in Zion restored, in all lands, you are our God, whom alone we serve in reverence. Baruch atah Adonai, she'odcha levadcha b'yirah. Page 59. At the top of the page. God of goodness, we give thanks together for the gift of life, wonder beyond words, for the awareness of soul, our light within, for the world around us so filled with beauty, for the richness of the earth which day by day sustains us. For all these and more, we offer thanks. Baruch atah Adonai, hatov shimcha u'lecha ha'ed lehuto. Page 60. Shalom Rahav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rahav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Ki atahu melech Adon lechol hashalom. Ki atahu melech Adon lechol hashalom. Shalom Rahav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rahav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. V'tov b'einecha levarech et Amcha Yisrael b'chol Shlomecha, Shalom Raham, Al Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Leolam. Shalom Raham, Al Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Leolam. Tasim Leolam. Tasim Leolam. We take a moment for our own silent prayer, reflection, and meditation. Oseh Shalom Bimrama, Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, V'imru Amen. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu, V'al Kol Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu, V'al Kol Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu, V'al Kol Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu, V'al Kol Yisrael. Our service continues with Misha Beirach, a prayer for healing. And in our book, it's on page 253. As we offer this prayer for healing, healing of the body, healing of the spirit, for those here and seeking healing, for those joining us virtually, also seeking healing, for our loved ones who are healing around the country and perhaps around the world, and especially for these members of the congregational family that you asked us to include. We pray for healing for Elise Bader, Lucy Karen, Kenny Elliott, Margaret Gerstein Lamb, Jacob Pollock, Dave Robinson, Ron Rothschild, Harry Singer, Rabbi Andrea Steinberger, Lauren Victor, and Debbie Weiner. And we invite anyone in the congregation who'd like to add a name for healing to rise at your seat and share their name.
Sheldon and Donna Pudick. Carol Clement, my cousin.
Stephanie Fine, and Pastor Chef Jeff Carter from Concord.
Diane Rutledge.
David Lagershire, Rich Atkins.
For all of them, in the middle of page 253. Mishabera avotenu mikor habracha limotenu. May before us. Help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Mishabera imotenu mikor habracha lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. And our service continues now on page 259 with a prayer for the state of Israel. We pray. Sholom Yerushalayim Yishlayu Ohavayim. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. May those who love you prosper. Avinu Shebashamayim, O Heavenly One, Protector and Redeemer of Israel, bless the state of Israel, which marks the dawning of hope for all who seek peace. Shield it beneath the wings of your love. Spread over it the canopy of your peace. Send your light and truth to all who lead and advise, guiding them with your good counsel. Establish peace in the land, fullness of joy for all who dwell there. And together let us say, Amen. Okay, well, my friends, you're in for a treat tonight. Let's see, I wrote a few things down so that I wouldn't forget, because when my mentors are here, I get a little nervous. Dr. Rabbi Gary Zola is an old friend of mine, from before I became a rabbi. He put me on the path to become a rabbi, along with many others who are now rabbis. In his past role as Dean of Admissions at the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion in Cincinnati. I was fortunate to work with Rabbi Zola when I was a rabbinical student as the student director of youth programs for the College Institute, and I spent many hours learning from him and working closely with him to create new programs for potential future rabbis and Jewish high school and college kids as we planned the entire weekend when they visited Cincinnati from all around the United States. Rabbi Zola introduced me to Olin St. Ruby Union Camp Institute, known as Asrui. And we have at least one Asrui, maybe more than one Asrui camper here today. That's where I went from knowing a couple rabbis in St. Louis to dozens of rabbis from all around the country and other Jewish scholars who taught and continue to inspire me on my path to become a rabbi. Dr. Zola became the American Jewish Archives' second director in 1998, is that right? Succeeding his teacher, also he was my teacher, and Rabbi Zola's mentor, Professor Jacob Rader Marcus, of blessed memory, who was the prodigious scholar who first defined the field of American Jewish history. Dr. Marcus founded the American Jewish Archives in 1947 and served as its director until his death in 1995. And under Professor Zola's leadership, the archives became the world's largest freestanding research center dedicated solely to the study of the American Jewish experience. Rabbi Zola was always kind, helpful, and extremely knowledgeable, and I'm blessed to call him my colleague now and my friend, and we are blessed that he managed to make time for us on this special weekend, tonight and tomorrow, Please join me in welcoming our scholar in residence, Rabbi Gary Zola. You're very welcome. Thank you.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Like any good clergy person, before I speak, I have something to say. It really is wonderful to be back here. I don't know if some of you have heard me here in your congregation before. I've been here a few times. And in particular, because of my area of research, as you will see in a minute, I've written a book on Lincoln and the Jews. I became familiar with the history of your congregation, a history which, by the way, in which you're entitled to take great pride. And so it's wonderful to be back. I just want to say a few words before I actually begin to teach. First of all, I see my colleagues are here in addition to Rabbi Cantor. I see Rabbi Datz, who's your Rabbi Emeritus, and I'm pretty sure you came into HUC when I was Dean of Admissions as well. And some of you may say, well, how is it that Zola doesn't look quite as decrepit as he should? Because, you know, if I was admitting a Rabbi Datz, you might think I should be 120. And the only thing I can say in response to that is I've never served in a congregation. And Rabbi Stern, who I just met this evening, the rabbis will tell you this is really the truth, that one of the highest compliments that a rabbi can possibly earn is when colleagues come to listen to you speak and make the effort. Very often, rabbis don't enjoy coming unless they're on the pulpit, and so I really do appreciate their presence. I also want to share with you, since it's Valentine's Day today, all day, and that my beautiful bride of almost 49 years is here with me. This is Steffi, and yes, thank you. And, you know, I used to travel quite a bit over my years, and we've now gotten to the stage of life where Steffi starts to go with me. And she used to say, listen, I can listen to you for free at home. I don't have to go anywhere. So.
Rabbi, you also want to recognize Rabbi Barry Marks.
Oh, Rabbi Marks, I don't. Rabbi, thank you for doing that. I don't think we've met before. Have we met? We have. Well, it just goes to show you I am losing my buttons. What can I say? So, while we're talking about rabbis, let me say a few words about that, and then I'll begin to teach. You know, many people are surprised to hear. Well, let me say it this way. You can, if any of you have been teachers or mentors in your own careers, you know how joyful and wonderful it is to see someone at the very beginning and then to watch them enter into their field and really make a contribution. And when I began my work in admissions, I did that for 16 years. Almost 900 rabbis were admitted during those years. Many of those years, I was working on my PhD, which was the purpose, so I could get onto the faculty of the college. But I didn't realize as I was beginning how gratifying it would be to meet all of these people on their way in, and then to see what they were able to accomplish and what they were able to achieve for the Jewish community. Your current rabbi is a great example of that, and you know, to see him from his college days and then to watch all that he's done in so many roles, it's so fulfilling and rewarding. And that leads me to my point. is some of you may or may not know that the liberal rabbinate is currently suffering from a crisis. We are not gaining applicants in the numbers that are needed. Some of you may be under the misapprehension that, well, our community is shrinking a little bit. In truth, the American Jewish community is growing. And in truth, still almost 85% of American Jewry are non-Orthodox in their way of life. So there's a huge group of people, they may not all be in the synagogue. And right now, because of the numbers, in 15 years, 10 years, there are going to be many congregations that are going to be without rabbis. And we need to think about that. And everywhere I speak, I talk about this. Because this is not a job just for rabbis. This is a job that has to be done by the Jewish community. And the liberal Jewish community. The Hasidic community, their problem is they don't have enough places to send people anymore. Because, you know, you do need Jews. But they're all over the world, and there's more rabbis in the Orthodox community than are needed. Many of them go into business. But our liberal community desperately needs rabbis. So I tell congregants, I was just in Knoxville, similar congregation 2 weeks ago, rabbis don't grow on trees. They just don't. And if you have a very caring, capable, wonderful rabbi, as you do, you should treasure that. And I hope you'll join me and the rest of the liberal Jewish community in doing what we can to raise up another generation of rabbis to take care of our children and our children's children. I know this congregation has done that in the past, because I know at least of one student who grew up in Springfield who became a rabbi in Cincinnati, and maybe there are even more. Now tonight, this Shabbat, we're, well, first of all, a day before, 2 days ago, we marked Lincoln's 216th birthday. And that's what brings me to Springfield, because there's a big a Lincoln conference this weekend. And so I'm in town to attend that, and I wanted to see if I could be with you and do a little teaching on Lincoln and the Jews. And it's really, the Torah portion actually conspires this year with this particular anniversary of Lincoln's birthday, because we're reading from the Torah portion of Yitro, Jethro. And it's one of the two Torah portions in the entire lectionary readings, which are named after people who are not Jewish. And so that's an appropriate theme for tonight, because if you're familiar with the story in this week's portion, Moses is having trouble leading, and he's being overwrought, and he can't keep up with all his duties, and he consults with his father-in-law, Jethro, who gives him advice and counsel as to how best to pursue leadership. And in a certain sense, he creates a system which is a form of representative government. He gets help from people. Well, but the important thing is that here we have a Jewish leader, Moses, who's consulting and taking guidance from a non-Jewish figure. And of course, at the end of the portion, you have the 10 Commandments. And we all know that the first 5 commandments focus on some particularistic commandments for the Jewish community, but the last are all universal demands. And So the mixture of the particular and the universal, the leadership that we learn from the Jewish community and as well as from beyond is an appropriate way to study and think about Lincoln. It fits in, if you will, with our portion. So let me begin, because I know I'm standing between you and our Aruchat Shabbat, our Sabbath meal. So for those of you who are finding it too painful to be casting your eyes on my countenance, you will also want to take a look at the screen. And we'll begin this way. In this very entertaining book, and if you haven't seen it and read it, I urge you to do so. It's very wonderful. And the author, a man by the name of Andrew Ferguson, and for those of you who are Yiddishists, his name is Ferguson. He's not Jewish. It is not Ferguson. And he writes a wonderful book in which he travels around to a lot of different interesting places in America that focus on Lincoln. He comes to Springfield and talks about that. I'm not going to speak about that, but one chapter is devoted to a visit that he makes to a restaurant which is in Wicker Park, Illinois. This restaurant is the Little Thai Cafe, and he talks about how he meets there a man by the name of Oscar Esche. Esche is an immigrant from Thailand who comes to the United States in 1973. And according to Mr. Ferguson, the Esches are famous in the Chicagoland area, or they were, because evidently when they first moved to America, they had little children, and they took their little children to Springfield, Illinois, where they visited all the sites relating to Abraham Lincoln. They taught their kids about Abraham Lincoln, and of course, like everyone, they brought back a memento. They brought back a bust of Abraham Lincoln. Now, some of you know that the Thai religion, the gods, really you can feed them and take good care of them. And so when they came back home, they put this bust of Lincoln in the restaurant and sort of, venerated Lincoln. And the restaurant had an amazing a surge of life, and it became a very popular restaurant. The Esches became quite successful restaurateurs. And so the reason that he writes about the Esches is because they have this statue of Lincoln, and they bring Lincoln a dinner every night. They feed the president every night. He's something of a demigod, right? And now I'm going to quote directly from Mr. Ferguson's book on this subject. And he says, the Esches say that they set out a meal for Lincoln in the restaurant right next to his statue. And then I'm carrying on. It's a full meal, everything. Entree, dessert, appetizer, drink also, Mr. Esche says. We change the meal every day so that it's different, and we serve him everything. Then Mrs. Esche interrupted Mr. Esche and said, yes, everything but no pork. Mr. Ferguson was a little perplexed, and he said, well, we don't want to be disrespectful. Mr. Esche evidently saw my puzzled look. Well, he is Abraham Lincoln. And Jewish people don't eat pork. Now, with all due respect to Mr. Esche, the 16th president, Abraham Lincoln, was not, technically speaking, a Jew. He is not, halakhically speaking, a Jew. But the point of my book and my talk today is that from the time of Lincoln's presidency up to the present day, many Jews have expressed a deeply felt love and respect for a man that contemporaries referred to as Father Abraham, but American Jews quickly venerated this man, identified with him, and then have adopted him as a spiritual kinsman. Or if we want, we could borrow Lincoln's own very famous turn of phrase, Jews have relentlessly embraced Lincoln as an almost chosen person. Now, why did this happen? Well, Lincoln's political ascendancy occurs at the very same time when both the territories of the Old Northwest and the population of the American Jewry were both at the same time expanding dramatically. And this phenomenon of the population explosion in the Old Northwest, we call it the Midwest today, and the arrival of a significant number of Jews coincidentally occurs at the very time when Lincoln is on his ascendancy. And so the states of Michigan, Indiana, Missouri, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Ohio, and of course, Illinois, are all experiencing a growth in Jewish population as well as in immigrant population. And many of these new settlers who came to this part of the world, they brought along with them from Europe Jews who settled in this part of the country. And as one historian has famously put it, even if Lincoln wanted to, he could not help but come into contact with Jewish people who were settling in this part of the country because they were a part of the same hardy pioneers who trekked along with all the others to open up this country ever westward bound. And so Lincoln comes to Springfield at a time when your congregation, not long afterwards, is taking shape and is coming into existence. And here in Springfield, as the Jewish community grows, Lincoln's neighbors are Jews, and he begins to meet Jewish people. This, I'll go back to this. This is from Jonathan Sarna's book, and the main point of this is that by the time Lincoln is president, and this is not an exaggeration, this is a fact scrubbed clean, Abraham Lincoln knew more Jews personally than all 15 of his predecessors combined. I mean, he had relationships and bonds with Jewish people. So in the 1840s and 1850s, Lincoln, an aspiring politician, is a resident here in Springfield. There's a congregation here that's taking shape, and he meets a number of Jews. Let me introduce you to some of the Jews that he met here in Springfield. You may know this name. This name is Julius Hammerslau. Hammerslau was a haberdasher here in Springfield, and according to historical records, Julius Hammerslau was not just Lincoln's tailor, he was a friend of the family. And we know as a fact that Lincoln asked the Hammerslaus to come to his inauguration and to accompany Mary Lincoln's relatives to Washington, D.C. for his first inauguration. Here's another document. This is relative to a Jew who lived in Jacksonville, Illinois, which is not too far, and Lincoln met him when he was on the circuit. This is referring to a Jew by the name of Henry Rice. Henry Rice had a general store and in Jacksonville, and Lincoln used to patronize that store when he was doing his legal circuit work. This is a letter after Lincoln becomes president, and he is pointing, he wants Mr. Rice, Henry Rice, to be appointed a sutler Does anybody know what a sutler is? It's a technical term. It is one who has been given permission by the government to provide goods and services for the government or for the military. So this man who owns a general store has a sutler authorization, which gives him this advantage to sell to its patronage. Now, I don't have to tell you folks that there's a town not too far from here, and we all know how it's pronounced, which is Athens, right? Because, you know, those bobos in New York City think it's Athens, but we know that it's Athens. And there, a man who, I took this picture myself in your old cemetery. This is my camera work. This is the grave of Louis Salzenstein. And Salzenstein's, he had his store for most of his life in Athens. He purchased this post office building in Athens called the Rogers Building. It served for much of the time as the town's post office, but he also, Old Salty, that's how he was known in Lincoln's day, Salzenstein had a general store and in this building. And Lincoln, it is known that Lincoln actually stayed in the store and slept over on occasion. I am told, I haven't been in the store myself, it still stands, but I'm told there's a few sort of mementos from that period, and you can visit it if you're ever in Athens. But perhaps the most remarkable relationship between Lincoln and a Jew has to do with these boys, the Jonas Brothers. Oh my goodness, that's the wrong slide. Here, these are the Jonas Brothers that I was talking about. Abraham Jonas, who is on the right, is the brother of Joseph Jonas. Joseph Jonas is famous in Cincinnati. Joseph Jonas is the first Jew to settle in Cincinnati, Ohio, and remain there permanently. He's a watchmaker. He brings his brother Abraham Jonas, and somehow along the line, Abraham Jonas leaves and moves to Kentucky. And then eventually from Kentucky, Abraham Jonas moves to Quincy, Illinois, where he meets another Abraham, who's a lawyer like Abraham. These two Abrahams are Abraham Jonas and Abraham Lincoln. And I don't have time this evening to get into the intricacies, but these two Abrahams become political allies. Abraham Jonas is just as involved in politics as Abraham Lincoln, and they work together. He becomes Abraham Jonas becomes one of the Machers, who is one of the biggest proponents of Lincoln. And just before Lincoln runs for president, he's preparing to run for president in 1859. Lincoln writes a book, and when that book is published, he sends a copy of that book to his pal, his political pal, Abraham Jonas, who's Jewish. And as you can see, that letter has survived from 1860, and he says, "As you are one of my closest, most valued friends." So you see that Lincoln had many, many friends. Now, I'm going to move ahead a little faster because I can't dwell as much on everything. But there's a wonderful story about this man, Samuel Altshuler. Altshuler is a Jew who lives he's an immigrant. He comes and he lives in Urbana. It's not too far from here, about 40 minutes or so by car. And he goes into a brand new business. I'm sure he did not do this in Europe. He becomes a photographer. And he hears that a man in 1850 or early 1858, one of the two, he learns that Lincoln, who wants to be senator, is in Urbana for legal work. And this enterprising young Jewish man, Altshuler, says, if I could get a picture of Lincoln and put it in my shop, that would be an accomplishment for my business. So he approaches Lincoln, and he asks if he could take his picture. And Lincoln says, okay, I'll come by the shop later today. He comes by the shop and he brings along a colleague, a man by the name of Cunningham, who later will write about this incident. And when he shows up at the shop, Mr. Altshuler is very disappointed because Abraham Lincoln is wearing a white smock, and he wants him to be wearing his dark tails, his coat. So he asks Lincoln to go back to the hotel and change, and Lincoln says, I do not have my coat with me on this trip. So this enterprising Jew does not give up, and he says, well, would Mr. Lincoln consider wearing my coat for the picture? And Lincoln readily agrees, but there's only one problem with this idea. Mr. Lincoln is 6'4", and Mr. Altshuler is 5'4". Well, he puts his coat on, and Cunningham in the middle writes about this later in life, that Lincoln could not stop laughing because of how ridiculous the coat was, because the coat sleeves went up to his elbows. And he is not supposed to laugh, as you know, when they take pictures in those days, because they get blurry. So it's a whole to-do to get a picture of Lincoln. At one point he tells Altshuler to tell him jokes. If you laugh, he'll get it out of his system. And it takes about, here this man is doing a favor for this Jewish photographer, and he ends up there for an hour trying to stop laughing. Well, this is the photo, the real photo that Altshuler takes, and you see that it's cut in a way so that you can't see his arms. Altshuler mentions that his coat had a velvet collar. And some people say, if you look carefully, that Lincoln is pursing his lips in an effort not to burst out into laughter, to hold himself together. The last example here that I want to give not only is an illustration of Lincoln's association with Jews, but it's also an illustration of how Lincoln learned how to communicate with Jews, how to talk to Jews. You're looking at a likeness, a photo of Abraham Cohen. Cohen was, at this time of Lincoln becoming president, he was the sitting city clerk of the city of Chicago, which is important. He was also a Democrat, not a Republican. And he was, at the same time, he was the president of the first congregation in the city of Chicago, which is Kehilat Anshe Marut, K-A-M. Lincoln wants to meet with him and know him because Lincoln is interested in his political position. But Lincoln hears that this is a Jewish man who's the president of a congregation. And Lincoln knew the Bible. Lincoln may not have attended a denominational church with regularity, but Lincoln knew the Bible inside and out. It was one of the few books that he read in great depth. And according to Cohen's daughter, Lincoln and Cohen discuss the Hebrew Scriptures. And Mr. Cohen, who's a knowledgeable Jew, is so impressed with Lincoln's ability to discuss the Hebrew Bible that he becomes a partisan to Lincoln. And when Lincoln is elected, Mr. Cohen creates a gift and sends it here to Springfield, and it arrives just before Lincoln leaves to go to Washington, D.C. And it is a flag made out of silk with Hebrew letters on the bars and stripes. And the Hebrew phrase, according to Mr. Cohen, and we know this is a fact, is Chazak ve'amatz al ta'arotz ve'al techad ki imacha Adonai Elohecha b'chol asher telech. Be strong and courageous, be not afraid nor dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. This flag we know was in the White House because Mr. Cohen got a thank you letter for the flag. And McKinley, President McKinley, speaks about the flag, but it's lost. But in my research, I found a glass daguerreograph of the flag. And this is it. I published it in my book. This is a picture of it, without color, of course. And at the bottom here it says, this is a flag that Abraham Cohen made for President Lincoln. The point here is how many Jews Lincoln knew even before going into the White House, but also his ability to make friends with Jews. He was not afraid of Jews, he didn't steer clear of them, and had a way of helping them to relate to him. Now, there are three events that occur, and I'm going to do this very quickly because my teacher, Dr. Marcus, you heard about him, he used to say, and Rabbi Dad's is smiling because he knows what's going to come out of my mouth. Rabbi Marcus used to say, people can absorb only as much as their tushy can endure. So I don't want to get to the point where you can no longer absorb what I'm teaching. But there were three events that occurred during the Lincoln presidency that really endeared Lincoln to American Jews. And I'm going to go through these very quickly. The first is the chaplaincy. In short, when the first recruitment bill was passed in June of 1861, that bill entitled the Army to recruit chaplains for the Union. And those chaplains, it said in the bill, had to be ministers of the Christian religion. There were already Jews fighting in the Union Army. Lincoln is approached by this man who's engaged by the Jewish community to go to Washington, D.C. and appeal to Lincoln. He does appeal to Lincoln. Lincoln eventually writes him after a few days that he's considered this. He writes to the rabbi, and he says, as you can see, I shall try to have a new law broad enough to cover what is desired by you on behalf of the Israelites. And within 5 months, Lincoln does accomplish that. And early in 1862, Congress passes a law that will allow Jews to become, and others to become chaplains in the military. Now, I badgered your rabbi so I could have sound, so I could play something for you now, but I'm going to skip over it because of time. Maybe we'll get to it at some other time. The second important event, and this, some of you may have heard of this, occurred in 1862 when Ulysses S. Grant is infuriated by the fact that there are a lot of profiteers going into the South and buying up cotton and taking it up north and getting rich. A lot of Jews were involved in this process, not all, but many were. And Grant issues what's called General Orders Number 11, which expels the Jews in his military department. It was the military department of Tennessee, which included the states of Kentucky, Tennessee, parts of Alabama, and parts of Kentucky. I said Kentucky, Tennessee, Alabama, and Mississippi. And this man from Paducah, this is a picture of the orders. This man from Paducah, his name is Caesar Caskell. He's from Paducah. He's in one of the unfortunate places where Jews actually do get booted out. The whole community at Paducah is thrown out, put on a boat, and sent up to Cincinnati, Ohio. By the way, this is the only time in American history that the Jews were expelled from American territory. The only time. And this man gets all the way to Washington, D.C. He makes an appointment to see Abraham Lincoln. He sees him on the 3rd of January, 1863, and he pulls out his expulsion papers. Lincoln at first will not believe this could possibly be true. And he shows him his expulsion papers, and according to this man, Caskell's brother, the president turns to Mr. Caskell and says, well, I see that the children of Israel have been expelled from the happy land of Canaan. And Caskell apparently responds by saying, that is correct, Mr. President, which is why we have come upon Father Abraham's bosom for protection. And that protection you shall have, says Lincoln, and he hands him a note and he says, take this to General Halleck. I've ordered the order to be revoked. And this is a telegram from the leader of B'nai B'rith, Henry Hart, who sends a note, this is going to the leader of the B'nai B'rith, Mr. Henry Hart, and it's from Adolphus Solomons, who is a prominent Jew in Washington, D.C. I'll blow up the text itself. He says, I've just seen General Halleck, who revoked Grant's vile order on the 4th, the day it was received here. So that's exactly what happened. Lincoln saw Caskell the evening of the 3rd. On the 4th, Caskell got that revocation over to General Halleck, and Halleck revoked it. This endeared Lincoln to the Jewish community. And finally, very briefly, this is an issue which is going on to this day. You may or may not know that the inability of the Union to be victorious over a much smaller army led many evangelicals in the North to believe that the only reason the Union was not winning was because we were a secular nation and that God was not in the script, in the Constitution. And they proposed to have a constitutional amendment which would read something like this, which would make it very clear that this was a Christian nation. And this sent the Jewish leadership of America into delirium tremens, because as we know from our own day and age, once the Constitution is no longer the law of the land, all bets are off in terms of minority rights. And this was very upsetting to the Jewish community, and the evangelicals go to see Lincoln in February of 1864, and they ask him to help them to change the Constitution and have an amendment, to have it amended. And Lincoln says to them very wisely, he says, look, we have a war right now. This is not the time to do this, he says. So he says, I feel your pain, he says. Leave it in my good hands. And Lincoln never speaks about it again. And Jews are convinced, and they write about this in the papers, that Lincoln did this deliberately in order to eliminate that. And for these three big reasons, Lincoln becomes, during his presidency, almost a demigod to the Jews of America. And now, as we sort of bring this to an end, I would love to teach you also about this man. This is Issachar Zachary. He was Lincoln's chiropodist. He was a Jew. And I'm just going to tantalize you by saying that Dr. Zachary was doing a lot more for Abraham Lincoln than merely trimming his toenails. He becomes a friend, and actually Lincoln sends him to New Orleans to negotiate with the Jews of New Orleans. I write about this. Today, by the way, there's a whole book on Issachar Zachary. Remarkable man. But let's come to the sort of story that brings this to an end. Of course, on April the 14th, 1865, American Jews grieved over the assassination of Lincoln. He dies the morning of the 15th, just like all other Americans. And in the days that follow the assassination, American rabbis and prominent laymen eulogized the president. And it's here in these eulogies, and they've been collected and they have survived, and there's about 30 or 40 of them. You see the president begins to become Judaized. It's in these eulogies that you see how we begin to adopt Abraham Lincoln not merely as a great American, but as a kinsman, as a member of the Jewish community, as if one might say, as one rabbi did say, Hu haya ke'echad mimenu. He was just like one of us. And so let me give you just a few quick examples. This is Benjamin Zold. Zold is the father of Henrietta Zold, the founder of Hadassah. And in his sermon, he writes these words: even while Lincoln was not flesh of our flesh, he was spirit of our spirit and essence of our essence. His soul, his heart, his entire nature are all truly Judaic and truly Jewish in spirit. In Cincinnati, Ohio, Rabbi Max Lilienthal is handed a note in the middle of Sabbath services that the president has been murdered, and he cries. And it takes him a while to recompose himself. And then he quotes these words, the first words he says to his congregation from the book of Samuel, 2 Samuel. He says, Ki sar v'gadol dafal hayom b'Yisrael. A great man has fallen in Israel today. And of course, never to be outdone, Rabbi Isaac Mayer Wise, the sainted founder of the Cincinnati Historic Rabbinical School, Hebrew Union College, he said these words in eulogizing Lincoln in Cincinnati, Ohio. He says, "Brethren, the lamented Abraham Lincoln believed himself to be bone of our bone and flesh of our flesh. He supposed himself to be a descendant of Hebrew parentage. He said so in my presence. And indeed, he preserved numerous features of the Hebrew race, both in countenance and in character." But perhaps the most remarkable and inspirational of all these examples comes from a document that I found in the Kentucky newspapers in Louisville, where we can say without question that Jews had begun to Leonize Lincoln while he was yet alive. This man, Louis Dembitz, you may be familiar with the name because that's the middle name of Justice Louis Dembitz Brandeis. This is Brandeis's uncle, who he admired and was a Louisville citizen and a great Jewish scholar and a remarkable Jewish leader and a Republican and a supporter of Abraham Lincoln and one of Lincoln's electors. This man was chosen to eulogize Lincoln when he was assassinated in Louisville, Kentucky. And the next day, on April the 23rd, the day after that, this entire eulogy appeared in the Louisville Secular Press. It's there for anybody to read, and this is how it begins. He says, "Brethren, you often called him jocosely," that's, by the way, a $25 word for humorously. "You often called him jocosely Rabbi Abraham, as if he were one of our nation, of the seed of Israel. But in truth, you might have called him Abraham, the child of our father Abraham. For indeed, of all the Israelites throughout the United States, there was none more thoroughly fitted who more thoroughly fitted the ideal of what a true descendant of Abraham ought to be than Abraham Lincoln. So from this remarkable document, we can discern that the man that most Americans would affectionately call Father Abraham, the Jews of Louisville at least, and I believe even beyond, had already crowned Abraham Lincoln with the highest accolade and title that the Jews can bestow upon anybody, and that is the name Rabbi. And that quote is how I named my book. We called him Rabbi Abraham. So friends, over the past 150 plus years, Abraham Lincoln has steadily become a part of the warp and the woof of American Jewish folklore. American Jews not only respect and admire Abraham Lincoln, I can demonstrate that they have adopted him as one of their own. American Jews believe that the precious human material out of which this extraordinary man was made just had to have been woven with some Jewish threads. Abraham Lincoln, therefore, has unique status in American history for the Jew. I refer to him as the only non-Jewish Jewish icon. No non-Jewish American figure, Franklin Roosevelt, John Kennedy, you name it, no matter how beloved or revered, no non-Jewish American figure can ever match Lincoln's enduring legacy among American Jewry. For Jews to this day still believe that Abraham Lincoln was ke'echad mimenu. He was like one of us. So I want to thank you very much for your kind attention. Now, tomorrow at lunch, we're going to look at another form of leadership, since this is President's Day weekend, and we're going to take a look at George Washington and his famous letter to the Jews of Newport. You may have heard of the letter, but you're going to learn about the letter in a whole different way tomorrow morning. Those of you who will be with me. So Shabbat Shalom, and thank you so very much for your time.
Two thumbs up. Well, two things. One is, so I did my own research on Lincoln and the Jews in preparation for this, and one of the things I read, which it was recorded as they're not even 100% sure it's true, but part of it is that Lincoln was shot on a Friday and died on a Saturday, and so a lot of Jews heard of this in synagogue and spontaneously stood up and recited the Mourner's Kaddish because he was so beloved. So thank you so much for teaching me so much more than even the little that I studied in preparation for your visit. We're so blessed to have you here. Thank you. Okay, some of you look hungry, so we're going to move to the concluding part of our service. We've got dinner downstairs afterwards. But right now, we turn to the middle of page 282. I'm going to invite David to join me as we open the Ark doors as we rise for Alei. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, l'teinu l'yotzer bereshit, shalom Hashem kiryeh ha'ratzo, v'lo samanu may be seated. Page 287. V'nemar v'haya Adonai l'melech al kol haaretz v'yom hahu yeh Adonai echad u'shemo echad. Service continues as we turn now to memory on page 293. Our thoughts turn to those who have departed this earth, our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people whose graves are unmarked, and those of every race and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and death. As I continue with our congregational memorial list, I invite you, when you hear the name of a loved one, to rise in recognition of your loved one. Our list begins with those who died in the past year: Betty Hurwitz, Mary Bennett, Tammy Adams, Les Estep, Stephen Baer, Renee Gordon, Alvin Cohen, Joseph Victor, and Lee Behrens. We add to their names the names of those whose yahrzeit we commemorate on this Shabbat: Shirley Eisenberg Bresnick, Nathan Chazen, Addie Cohen, Rupert Cohen, Minnie G. Fishman, Richard Foster, Rose Friedman, Michael Victor II, Etta F. Levy, Minnie Lilienstein, Samuel Lilienstein, Fred Luden, Harry Robert Morantz, Bernice B. Marblestone, Harriet McCarthy, Jeanette Prastine, Betty Roth, Jack Samuels, Maynard R. Schwartz, Samuel H. Silverman, Mark Snyder, Mildred Sokolow, Edward Steiner, Arthur Wexler, and Myrna Jane Wexler Feldstein. And we invite anyone who'd like to add a name of a loved one who died recently or whose yahrzeit you're observing to also rise and share their name.
Michael Schwartz.
And in solidarity with those standing, we turn to page 294, rise together, joining in the mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitgadash me Rabbah, B'yalma divrach v'ruteh b'yamlich malchuteh, v'chayachon u'vyomechon u'v'chayeh gavol beit Yisrael, v'agalav v'zman kari v'yimru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevarach le'olam lo me'almaya, Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpahar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei v'kudesha v'rifu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata, da'amiran v'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shalama Rabbah min shemayim, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. V'seh shalom b'mromav, U'yaseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Zichronam livracha, may their memories be for blessing, and together let us say amen. You may be seated. So, some quick announcements about what's coming up in the near future. Tomorrow, Rabbi Zola will be back at noon here for Bring Your Own Lunch, as he teaches us, as he told us, about Washington and the Jews. And I'm working with Rabbi Stern, who's also here, so that we can next month have Purim together on Purim at Temple Israel. So that'll be Thursday, March 13th, and then we'll have a Shabbat here on the next day, on the 14th, where we'll do a little additional Purim celebration. Any other announcements? So thank you again so much, Rabbi. We're so glad you're here. And it took me a while when you first told me you're going to be in town for this Lincoln thing, because shortly after I arrived, I didn't realize it was the same thing, but the Lincoln Society reached out to me and said, please, oh please, we've been trying so hard for years now to get a rabbi to come do the blessing at our gala. And I said, okay, I'll do it, and didn't know much about it. But then I slowly, as you told me you were in town for it, put two and two together. And so I'll see you at noon tomorrow, and then again at the gala celebrating Lincoln's birthday tomorrow night.
They're going to have a real rabbi do the blessing.
Right, and hopefully there'll be cake as well. Okay. So we'll finish tonight, because they asked us for the dinner, to do Kiddush and Motzi here. So we'll do a short Kiddush and Motzi. I'll lead down here, but I'll ask everybody to rise. And then those who RSVP'd, I can smell dinner wafting up already. And if you're like me, you're getting Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei b'riah ha'olam l'chaim. And Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen. Once again, thank you, Rabbi Zola. Thank you, everyone who came tonight. And Shabbat Shalom for those staying for dinner. We'll see you downstairs.